Thank you.
Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. I think there's a few attendees still trickling in. My name is Darcy Meals. I am the Deputy Director of the Center for Access to Justice at Georgia State's College of Law and the Director of Public Interest Programs for the Law School. And I'd just like to welcome you all to this first in a series of 6 courses we'll be doing online. This first one is called Chasing Justice, How to Be Part of the Solution. And it's our Minding the Justice Gap series. So I'd like to turn it over to Judge Salinas to kick us off for today.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Katie Salinas. I'm a United States Magistrate Judge here in the Northern District of Georgia, and I see a lot of familiar faces out there. It's good to see everybody. I want to welcome you to this first class. It's called Chasing Justice, and this is part of a 6-class series called Minding the Justice Gap. And we came up with the idea of the phrase justice gap from Britain, where they had warning signs as you stepped onto a train, and it said mind the gap. And the idea is that we want to help people mind the gap between being a citizen in Georgia and being able to have your civil justice needs met. And I want to specifically thank Professors Lauren Studial and Darcy Meals, who are in charge of the Center for Access to Justice at Georgia State University College of Law. And they're hosting this series for us, and we look forward to working with all of you this year. This year, as chair of the Access to Justice Committee of the State Bar of Georgia, we have partnered with the Judicial Council's Access to Justice Committee and to work together on some initiatives. And I want you to know what we've been working on from the State Bar side first. My committee, which is again the Access to Justice Committee of the State Bar, we've been working primarily on 4 different areas. First, improving communication, especially between lawyers, about how to find opportunities to do pro bono work. We've been working on recognizing lawyers, paralegals, and organizations who do pro bono work and figuring out ways to acknowledge them, recognize them, and encourage more. And part of that, the State Bar has improved its honor roll. It used to be that if you did 50 cases, if you took 2 cases through one of the legal services organizations, you would get recognition as being on the honor roll. And we've added to that, and now if you self-report 50 hours of pro bono work, you'll be on the honor roll. And if you self-report 100 hours, you're even at a higher level. So there's going to be you can see there's actually, if we could put up on the screen, there's a link to how you can sign up and self-report those hours and get reported on the State Bar. So that's another way of trying to improve or incentivize people to take pro bono cases. We've also got this new website. It's not a new website, but it's updated, and you can see it there on the screen, www.georgialegalaid.org. And I encourage you to check it out. It's revamped and has a lot of really important resources. And the 4th thing, which I need help from all you guys on, is giving awards to people who have gone above and beyond, and to organizations who have gone above and beyond in addressing the gap. And so for that, we're accepting nominations for awards, and you would think that there would be a lot of people nominating, and there really haven't been. And part of the reason is that it takes a little bit of effort to nominate someone. And I just really encourage you, if you know someone or an organization that's doing good work that fits into one of the categories of awards that the State Bar gives, I encourage you to take, I would say a minute, but it's more than a minute, take an hour or even a few hours and put together an application for them. We really have been not getting a lot of applications, and I think it's really important that you have to nominate people in order to get them to the awards. So please, if you have someone in mind, think about that. And you can go on the State Bar's website and see the different awards that we've given out. And then finally, we have the State Bar's Access to Justice Committee has taken over the Georgia Free Legal Answers platform. And that's a way that people can go online and just answer a question. Lawyers can go on, you just set up a profile, you go onto the website, you pull down a question, you look at it. If it's too hard or you don't know the answer, you just put it back, and you can scroll through until you find one that you know, and then you answer it and you're done. And we've, at the State Bar, feel like that is a really good tool for people to do little bite-sized pieces of pro bono. And our committee has been working on that. So if any of this is interesting to you, we're always looking for new people and new blood to work on our committee. And if you want to just email me, you can definitely do that. You can just email me directly, and we'll see if we can get you helping out with our committee if you're a lawyer. But interestingly, we're also working with with Justice Colvin and the committee on the Judicial Council. They have their own committee that's working on these issues. And we had a joint retreat earlier this year. And at that retreat, one of the ideas was for us to come up with these classes to make sure that judges know what's going on and that lawyers know what's going on. And then people who are just interested in general can see what's happening and figure out if they can maybe replicate some of the different projects around the state or get involved in different ways. And so that's what this series of classes is. And I'm really proud that we were able to make this connection. And I mean, a lot of that credit goes out to Michelle and her organizing efforts and figuring out how to bring in Georgia State to this conversation as well. And so I hope that you don't mind we're doing it on Zoom, but this is one of the things that where people really can just jump on during their lunch hour and see it. And we feel like this is one of the ways that we can use the new technology post-pandemic to increase access to justice. So we really need your creativity and your energy this year. We want to do some big things and get you to join in the conversation. And so with all that, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to Judge Tabitha Ponder, who's going to be the moderator for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Salinas, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Tabitha Ponder, and I wear several hats. I'm a part-time judge in Cobb County, that's Magistrate Court, and I'm so very grateful for that job. It's taught me a whole lot, and I get to work hands-on and see access to justice happening every day in our court. But today I am coming to you in the capacity of staff attorney, and that's via contract for Access to Justice Committee of the Judicial Council of Georgia. Justice Colvin, you will hear from her later. She's my chair and my boss. We absolutely love working with her. The title of this class today is Chasing Justice. You can be a part. How can you be a part of the solution? And our goal today is to tell you what we've been working on to chase justice in Georgia, what we've learned, and what we think still needs improvement. I'm so lucky to be joined by some wonderful panelists and some of the folks who are in the trenches as it relates to access to justice in Georgia. Georgia State University law professor Lauren Sudial, Albany attorney Gerald Williams, who serves as executive director, and that's of Dougherty County Law Library and SelfHelp Center. We also have Middle Georgia Justice Executive Director Amy Dever, and DeKalb County Superior Court Judge Dear Jackson. She's actually on our committee as well. I'm not going to read their bios, but please take some time and read their bios. They are on the website. And I want you to know that they are people who wake up every day and work on improving access to justice. I'm going to start with you, Professor Sudial. Fairly recently, we've been talking about legal deserts, that new term we hear floating around. You've written a paper about this issue. So could you introduce that term to us, and how would you define it?
Sure. Thanks, Tabitha, and thanks also to Michelle and Darcy and others for organizing this, and the State Bar Access to Justice Committee for supporting it. So when we talk about legal deserts, often people take that to mean a lack of access to lawyers, although I would think about it a little bit more broadly and think about a lack of access to legal resources or legal assistance more generally, and hopefully I'll talk about that more later. But that, I think also refers to the fact that pro bono networks and other nonprofit organizations that might provide assistance are also spread thinner throughout the state. And anyone who has thought about legal deserts in Georgia knows that there are a lot across the state. So there are, for example, the five metro Atlanta counties account for about 35% of the state's population, but 70% of the state's attorneys, 40% of the state's attorneys are in Fulton County alone. So if you look at a map, and the center has done one back in 2016, if you look at where the lawyers are, they're very much clustered around Atlanta. Back in 2016, there were 5 counties that didn't have any lawyers at all, and another 59 had 10 or fewer. And I think the more recent numbers, which I know some people are looking at now, suggest that the numbers are even more severe, right? So that the numbers of counties without any lawyers are getting larger, and that might be due in part to shifts in rural populations, probably a number of factors. And I think it's important to note also, right, that when we talk about legal deserts, a lot of those individual counties are also surrounded by a lot of other counties that are in a similar situation. So it may be that there's no lawyer available for many, many counties away from where you are. And even when there are, a handful of lawyers, that might be the prosecutor, the public defender, right, the judge. So it may not be a lawyer who's actually available to help you with the needs that you have or to actually represent you in court. The last point that I'll just make quickly here is I do think, even though the points I was just making refer largely to more rural counties, I don't think the term legal deserts is exclusively rural, right? There are a lot of legal deserts in Atlanta. I think if you think about it as just being areas or pockets where people don't have ready access to legal assistance, particularly given a lot of issues around access and volume in places like Atlanta, there are legal deserts both in Atlanta, but also across the state.
Thank you, Professor. And before I go to my next question, I do want to mention Gerald Williams. He's with us. I think I told you about Dougherty County Law Library, but I don't know if I mentioned his name, but Gerald, thank you for being here as well. He's the executive director. So Professor, what have you learned about legal deserts in Georgia?
So I think, one thing that's tough about a lot of these areas is not only do you have fewer lawyers or fewer resources able to provide assistance, but they often correlate with higher poverty rates, lower education rates, language barriers, right? So aside from not having someone who can actually help lead you through the process, there may be other barriers in place, just decreasing the likelihood that you're going to actually have access to justice. And I think, there are plenty of studies out there to show that when lawyers aren't present, the law, right, courts don't work as they should, defenses that might be raised aren't raised, evidence isn't presented, you're less likely to have all the facts aired to really get a sense of what happened as a matter of fact. And I think that there's a range of research on this point, but I think it's pretty clear that for the most part, lawyers do make a difference. In my own work, I've seen this looking at eviction court across the state. In that instance, there were so few tenant lawyers that we actually weren't able to assess what difference lawyers made for tenants, but it was clear that for landlords, lawyers made a difference, right? And I think that there are other studies in other states have shown the same. I think it's also, right, it's hard to also measure the impact of unmet legal needs. So even though I can point to things like, the effect that lawyers may have or not, it's really hard to do research in a lot of these counties, in part because, right, as you all know on this webinar, we have so many counties in Georgia and they're all using different systems. And so to do this work, you really have to spend a lot of time in all of the different places, which can be challenging. Data can often be hard to access. So I think the last point that I'll make is that it's, in a sense, hard to know what we don't know, right? I think it's really hard to fully assess, aside from looking at really obvious metrics like lawyers, right? What people are accessing and what impact it's having on them, and people who may not even be coming to court at all because they're not even aware that this is a possibility for them.
Yes, and I will say that is so true. We just had a clinic this past Saturday in what is probably a real legal desert. It's Wilcox County, and they actually have one part-time lawyer in the entire county. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to even gather information in those areas. So I have another question for you. What are some proposed solutions to serving legal deserts?
So I've talked a lot about lawyers, right? A lot of people on this call are probably lawyers. But I've said this before, but while lawyers serve justice, we do not have a monopoly on it, right? And there are a lot of other mechanisms that I think should be used toward that end. I think realistically, lawyers are not going to be the solution or the only solution to legal deserts. And I think the fact that there are so many and that they are so expansive suggests that we also have to think more expansively about how we might, other vehicles we might put into place to address access to justice, right? So just a couple of possibilities. One is more lawyers, but through incentivizing lawyers both to practice in underserved areas, both rural and urban, sort of try different areas of practices of law, and also to support those lawyers in those areas. I know the Young Lawyers Division has done work in this area through looking at succession planning for lawyers in some of these more rural areas who are planning to retire. But I think it can be harder, for young lawyers to go to more remote areas where they worry about whether they will have the support they need, the professional mentoring they need, and those sorts of things, aside from just the financial difficulty and the fact that people are leaving rural counties to, lawyers or not. But I think also, and I know there have been failed attempts in the past to try to provide loan repayment assistance, so maybe revisiting some of those. I think also thinking more creatively. Right now during COVID, we saw courts be a lot more flexible about remote proceedings and video conferencing. So maybe thinking more creatively, I know others are thinking about this as well, about how we might use some of those lawyers clustered in the Atlanta area to provide other services, right? Maybe not ideal, but in certain instances might be a good way to provide assistance in other parts of the state. But I think we also have to think about who else can help besides lawyers? Right? There are plenty of examples across the country of non-lawyer assistance programs that have been very successful, some that are more formalized, where you actually have certification and people get certain training and education specific to that. Others that are not quite as structured, right? Navigator programs. So I think there's a range of different things that different courts could implement, albeit if regulations allow them to do so, which I guess leads to a third point, right? I think obviously, as a profession, as a bar, we have to think about what regulations we have in place and how we might think about those differently. Right? I think clarifying and narrowing some of our unauthorized practice of law provisions. Georgia's is really broad, I think too broad. I've written an article about how I think some really broad prohibitions on that may actually violate due process. But setting those arguments aside, right, I think even just clarifying what is and what isn't allowed, because when we don't, I think that has sort of a chilling effect and makes the people who are most readily in the position to provide assistance, people in the courts, really nervous about saying anything. And I think there's a lot of information that we can provide people with that would be very helpful, that is far from advising them about their individual case or talking about the facts of their situation. I think that there's nothing wrong with telling people what the law is and what their options are under the law. And the last point is, I think some of the onus has to probably be on courts themselves, because no matter what we do, I think there are always going to be people who don't have any assistance, who are left to navigate the process by themselves. And so I think the more we can just make the process and the parts of that process more accessible to the ordinary person without any legal expertise, the better. Right? So simplifying court forms, simplifying procedures. I'm just making it easier for people who are just coming to court by themselves to get what they need without any legal assistance.
Yes, thank you, Professor, so much. We appreciate that. I want to now switch over to Amy and Gerald. Both of you have been running entities to serve low income or self-represented, and I like to term it unrepresented litigants in Georgia. Amy, let's start with your program in Macon. Tell us what you're doing and tell us how it's working. You're muted.
Hang on. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Middle Georgia Justice, and I just started working with the organization in the spring. My first official day was in March the 1st, but I started a little bit earlier than that. We provide assistance to low-income families. Individuals come to us either from referrals, and we get a lot of them. Speaking to something the professor just spoke about, the clerk's offices, and we serve the Macon-Bibb area and this contiguous county. So that's Jones, Twiggs, Houston. Sorry, thought I'd turn that off. Jones, Twiggs, Houston, Crawford, Peach, and Monroe counties. Not particularly deserts for representation, but if you don't have a key to the oasis, you might as well be in the desert. And that's who we're trying to help, is low-income families. We focus on family law, which includes divorce, legitimation, custody, modifications of divorce and things like that. And we also work with heirs property and probate in low-income families. So that's what we're doing. Our current model is sort of evolved. We started out with an incubator program and lawyers who were providing a certain number of hours of pro bono assistance. And then we sort of morphed into having local attorneys sign on as volunteer attorneys, which if anybody's been involved in trying to get pro bono volunteers understands the challenges associated with that. And we now have a staff attorney who is devoted to family law, and just hired the first of this month another staff attorney who's devoted to probate and heirs property. So we're actually bringing folks in. We have interview processes. We sort of assess what their situations are. If we can help them in our self-help center, we've got some volunteers, and we also have our attorneys sort of monitor folks and try to help them through the self-help process. You know, I find the self-help process challenging right now because a lot of folks just really get bogged down with the forms. I mean, just inputting the data is difficult for many, many folks. You know, I've had 2 clients come in who are have such severe disabilities that they can't even type. So, you know, it's a challenge for that. But I've also found in the months that I've been here that a lot of people really just need to come in and talk about what their issues are. They don't always understand what their issues are. That to me is the most meaningful part of the job, is actually the one-on-one interaction with the folks, talking about it, trying to ravel the mess, unpeel the onion, get to the bottom of it. So that's what we're doing. We're actually bringing in folks, giving them direct representation, and trying to attack it one case at a time.
Thank you. I can see how helping them spot the issues can definitely be challenging, but a lot of what they need to actually move through the process. So, Amy, what do you need to do better?
Well, you know, more money. That's what we all need, is, you know,
Right.
I mean, I really, you know, I think part of it is just time and figuring what really works the best. But right now, I feel like being able to provide direct representation, you know, I'd love to have more volunteers, but we just are, you know, kind of hitting a wall with that. And folks are just not willing to take on, either they're busy enough that they don't have time to take on pro bono cases, or whatever reasons people come up with that. But I would like to have more staff attorneys, the funding to have, I think I could have a couple in each category to handle it. I'm just now getting started with my first heirs, property, and probate person. So we're knocking some work out and trying to treat the organization as a small firm, so that we're actually providing the kind of assistance somebody would get if they were coming in and paying billable hours. You know, the beauty is that we don't have to deal with billable hours, but you know, we just need more time to spend with people and really help them assess their situation. I had a woman come in the other day needing help with, and she had tried the SelfHelp Center forms that had been provided to her by the clerk's office for a divorce. And by the time I sat with her for 20 minutes, I finally realized she had already filed for divorce in a county, but had not been able to get service. So she just kept filing for divorce in different counties. And I was like, no, that's not the way that works. But you know, that's what we need. We need more time, to be more staff that's trained, that, you know, are actual attorneys that can really work with folks and get to the bottom of their problems and figure out what's the best plan for a solution.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, family law definitely is one of those, the needed areas. We've heard Superior Court judges talk about maybe unrepresented folks in the system. It could be as high as 60% of those cases family law related. So thank you, Amy. Gerald, let's talk about the Dougherty County Law Library and SelfHelp Center, which I've been personally involved with since the beginning of our national grant that we received, I believe, in 2018. So tell us about the people you serve and how you serve them.
That's how you do it. Hit that button. Okay. The people we serve are people who just want to represent themselves sometimes, and people who just can't afford an attorney. However, our problem comes about with literacy. Some people can't even read the forms, let alone try to type, you know, things like that. We have the research through Westlaw and LexisNexis that some people actually try to use, and they just can't do that either. We spend a lot of time initially doing like a triage, finding out what it is that they need, what has happened, and then we can better, we're better able to tell them what we can and cannot do. For example, sometimes people want to have a civil suit, and we just don't do that. However, we do a lot of the family law legitimation, probate issues. We tend to just guide them, you know, through that process. And then sometimes that can be challenging. Whoever comes in, like I said, those who can afford and those who just want to represent themselves, we don't discriminate. However, we do tell them if we can or cannot help them. We do a lot of video conferencing when the judges, you know, just have their Zoom hearings with the Superior Court, and also with magistrate court, probation revocation. We have an area set up for people to come in and do those hearings right there in the Self-Help Center. And that has worked out very well. Our navigators do a very good job of, setting up the computers for them and letting them do all of that. However, we don't provide legal advice. That's one of the major things that people want. They want legal advice. They want somebody to tell them what to do. Well, if it's a self-help center, here are the forms. Here's a little bit of guidance and navigation, and they're on their own. We do have a list of lawyers that do not mind taking, referrals. And when we refer somebody to those lawyers, we say, now they may not do it pro bono, and they can give you a retainer amount for them. And if you can afford it, fine. But we haven't been able to get that many lawyers here to actually agree to do the work pro bono from start to finish on some cases, because we have a case right now that's going on with one of our lawyers. He agreed to try to help this person out, but she has some severe mental issues, and she lost her child 12 years ago. She's trying to get the child back, and she just can't seem to understand that she's not going to get the child back. And this lawyer is, at the end of his rope with her. But we participate in, the things that Goodwill or the Self-Help Center will also participate in expungement clinics. We also had a probate clinic where we had lawyers talk about probate issues, and they were allowed, the patrons who actually logged in were allowed to ask questions. It went over very well. We financed that through a grant through United Way, and we're planning on doing another one, hopefully by the end of the year, at least early next year. But that's really, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do in Dougherty County, Georgia, with the Self-Help Center / Law Library.
Thank you, Gerald. And the question I asked Amy, I'm sure it might be, your answer might be similar, but what do you need to do better?
Well, we need money and space, because if we were going to try to bring on more personnel, we just don't have the room to house them. As you know, we have already, at least we're in the process of our move from the second floor to the first floor, which actually doubled our space. However, if we were to get more people, we would need to wind up probably moving off site. But it is money, it is space, it would be more personnel.
Thank you, Gerald. So last but not least, I want to switch over to Judge Dear Jackson. I want to talk about our plain language initiative that our working group within the Access to Justice Committee has been working on. And it's much of what really related to a lot of things we've already spoken about today. With much effort, we now have some standardized plain language forms that Judge Dear Jackson shepherded through the Council of Superior Court Judges, and these forms are now approved. Judge, would you tell us a little bit about the forms and videos, and why are they important?
Yes, the forms and videos are important because it helps. It sounds so touche, but it creates access. If everyone can go to a centralized place, and even if you don't have access to technology and you can get to a library to visit and type in this form, it is PDF fillable, so you can type in everything. You don't have to worry about crossing out on a piece of paper another jurisdiction's name. And in that, we also include the video. What else is needed? And these forms are specifically for divorces with minors, children, and divorces without children. We have some other forms that we're working, but we're not ready to roll those out. I will put in the chat the link so that you can see those documents. But in addition to getting the documents that you need, the pleadings, it tells you what else you need, your case initiation form, the summons and how to fill it out. And there's literally instructions that they will give you that walks you through it. And that's important for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, when you submit something, if it's not proper, we can't put you on a calendar. And sometimes there are judges who will reject them, they'll put you on, but we as judges and our staff cannot give you legal advice. And so all we can say is that your form is not complete, but we can't tell you how to complete it correctly. And so by following these instructions, what it does is it minimizes your stress. It will make it easier for you to get it through the system and to file it, to get a court date, and then to get your case resolved in a more expeditious and efficient manner. And so that is why it is important.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
All right, so, and you will put the link in the chat where the forms can be found. Thank you. All right, so we're out of time for this class, but we hope you've learned a bit about the work that's going on as it relates to access to justice in our state. We know there's still much to be done, and we hope you'll join us to be part of the solution. If you are a lawyer, please sign up on the Pro Bono website and help some families and help some of these families, or if you are close to one of these self-help centers, please check in and volunteer your time and your resources. Follow the GSU Access to Justice Center to keep up with the latest issues and classes. Our next class will be in October, and we will focus on the definition and work of that term you heard earlier, legal navigators, which is not a term used widely throughout Georgia, but it is a national term, and we would like to shed a little bit more light on that. We'll hear from some other states on the term and the work. I'm going to now ask our chair of our Access to Justice Committee, Justice Colvin, to give us some closing remarks. Justice Colvin.
Thank you so much, Judge Ponder. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of you all who joined this class today. A huge thank you. I think it's so important to talk about this topic. I want to also thank Judge Salinas, who had our opening comments, as well as the speakers and panelists. We thank you for your wisdom, your insight, and all that you're doing to ensure that access to justice is something that is more than just a title, but it actually exists. So joining us today means that each of you feel like you have a part in ensuring that everyone has access to justice and improving justice for everyone. It was the reason why I went to law school. After 3 years of private practice, I decided I wanted to devote my career to public service. And that's the reason why I'm here today. If you'll recall, ABA recently had an article which they published, which talked about civil cases and the fact that our system is broken because most people who appear in court are lawyerless. And so they're floundering, trying to figure out how to actually achieve justice with whatever their problem is. There is a site that is listed, a hyperlink that is listed in the materials that you have that will navigate you to this article. I suggest and really encourage you to read that. I would argue that our courts, our judges, and our system as a whole need to ensure that every citizen can actually ensure that they can access justice. And that means making it available for everyone. We cannot, as the professor said, lawyer our way out of this. We're going to have to find ways in order to meet the needs of the legal deserts that you've heard about here today. With 10 counties having virtually no attorneys and 25 or more counties having less than 25 attorneys, and many of those may be retired or no longer practicing, we must do more. One of the beauties of COVID, if anything positive came out of, is our ability to use technology. And so as of March 2020, we learned how to navigate the technological landmine that we find ourselves in. And so as a result, people have been able to access justice through the use of technology. You've heard particularly Mr. Williams talk about the fact that they use Zoom to help people with probation revocations who otherwise may not be able to connect to the system. And so we're very helpful for that. We've also started self-help centers throughout Georgia, and you've heard of some of those. Judge Weaver also has a self-help center in North Georgia. And also Judge Adams, as you heard, helped start the Middle Justice legal office, which helps people in Middle Georgia and throughout our state. One thing that Mr. Williams didn't mention that I found amazing is that out of the 159 counties, I think they have actually serviced over 100 counties. So people from everywhere are seeking assistance in this regard. I recently attended a record restriction in Southwestern Circuit law library and SelfHelp Center, and people were there getting help. Even before that, in my own jurisdiction, Macon, where I actually served before going on the Superior Court, I was a part of one of those clinics where I actually signed off on the paperwork. So I'd like to show you at this time, this is a picture of all of us at the Record Restriction Clinic in Daughtry County, but I'd like to show you at this time some of the quotes that show how monumental these restriction clinics are. I want to correct my past so I can have a better future. This will help me with housing. So apparently for this person, this was the thing that was keeping them from the affordable housing that they could have. And most of those affordable housing require that they have no felony convictions. And so this helped them. Another quote was, people get discouraged because there are so many steps in the records restriction process, but I was determined. And the Southwest Georgia Legal Help SelfHelp Center would not let me give up on myself. They're excellent. That's a testament to Mr. Williams and his staff. Another quote, all the community organizations here today are excellent and committed. People just need help. They just need some source. Also, if they get this off my record, it will be a birthday gift for me because my birthday is this month. I've been trying for 5 years. You make mistakes, but it doesn't mean you're still that person. People change. This record has stopped me from getting jobs and even from volunteering at church. I appreciate the second chance. Just imagine something from their past prevents them from their spiritual journey. That's huge. And so imagine, if you will, if we could do something like this, not just a one-off, but have constant efforts in helping people have restrictions on their record. One such person who engages in this kind of work is Doug Amar, the head of the Georgia Justice Project. And he told us, in fact, that 4 million Georgians have a criminal record of some sort. Another quote to just piggyback on this is, I'm trying to better my career and go back to school. I started my own graphic design business and I want to get a degree in business to improve my business. I have a degree in culinary arts, but I couldn't get a job because of my record. I'm happy to be here getting this done. With that number, these ideas, that number of the 4 million Georgians with criminal records of some sort, we know the need in our communities. These needs can help with family law issues, probate needs, rental assistance, and eviction prevention. So all of these are important. So if you want peace, that means you want justice. And the only way to have justice is to ensure that everyone, regardless of where they live, their economic situation, their educational ability, that requires that they have access. So we're currently working on a proposal for state funding for state grant program, to support and possibly create more legal self-help centers in Georgia. We want everyone in every community to be able to get to a center like this so that they can get the help they need. And so we know that there are too few lawyers to help us in this regard, so we need to create these centers. So we're working closely with the State Bar and Judge Salinas on this plan, and we've developed a card to help ensure that there are no unauthorized practice of laws, so people can know what they can do and what they can't do. And this link will lead you to the unauthorized practice of law counter card. As we move forward with our proposal, we want you to stay engaged and tell our story. Help us brainstorm other ways in which we can truly ensure that everyone has access to justice. So I want you to keep in mind to join our series of classes called Minding the Justice Gap. And remember, providing justice will eliminate the need to chase justice because it will be readily there for everyone. This work matters. This call of action is for you. It's for you to continue to create and give ways in which we can do this. And for all the law students, seek out pro bono opportunities within your school setting or clinic programs where you can start actually putting your legal education to work. Because no matter what field that prompted you to go to law school, remember your obligation as a counselor and attorney at law is to ensure that justice is provided for all, regardless of the arena that you find yourself. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing this work with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Justice Colvin, and thank you to all the panelists and Judge Salinas for opening us up. I'm Michelle Barkley, and I'm with the Judicial Council Administrative Office of the Courts, and it is my job to see if there's any question and answers. I see no questions, but we also can let you go and have lunch do stay engaged and watch the Twitter, the Center for Justice Twitter account. That's where we'll post the October class. We do not have a time yet for it, but we will be posting it and arranging it soon. And we'll be doing one every other month. And we've got many, many subjects to cover. So with that, we'll say goodbye and thank you all for attending. We look forward to engaging with you in the future.